Story number 1, Radio Dead Zone. I arrived at Copper Ridge Lookout Tower on November 14th in the early afternoon. The access road was still passable, though weather forecasts indicated the first significant snow system would move in within 48 hours. My assignment was routine winter shutdown maintenance, securing equipment, draining water lines, sealing the structure against seasonal weather. I had done this work at 3 other towers in the district over the previous 2 weeks. The tower itself was in standard condition. Built in 1958, it had been maintained to acceptable specifications. The cabin at the top measured approximately 12 feet by 12 feet, with windows on all sides and a fire finder table positioned at the center. The stairs were metal and secure. I checked the logbook first, as protocol required. The previous observer, whose name I will not record here, had maintained regular entries through November 10th. His final notation read, "Clear skies. Visibility 12 miles. No activity." His personal effects remained in the cabin: a radio unit, a winter coat, a thermos. I noted this in my preliminary report and photographed the items before securing them in the storage locker below. Base station later confirmed he had been extracted due to a family emergency on November 11th. The items would be collected during the next scheduled maintenance visit. I began the equipment inspection at 1400 hours. The fire finder is a mechanical device used to determine the bearing and distance of smoke plumes. It consists of a rotating azimuth ring, a sight vane, and a distance scale. During routine shutdown, I verify that all components move freely and that the bearings are recorded accurately in the logbook. I noticed something irregular immediately. The azimuth ring had been rotated to face a bearing of 234 degrees. This in itself was not unusual. What was unusual was that every single logged entry from November 4th through November 10th contained the identical bearing notation. 234 degrees. 16 entries. Same bearing. No variation. I checked the sight vane. It was positioned to align with that bearing. I looked outward through the cabin windows in that direction. The terrain was typical ridge country, mixed forest, rocky outcrops, no visible structures or roads. The distance scale in the logbook ranged from 2 to 7 miles for each entry, but all bearings were identical. I made a note of this discrepancy and continued with the equipment checklist. At 1700 hours, I prepared a light meal and reviewed the maintenance schedule. Sunset was at 17:45. At 1900 hours, I was conducting a final external inspection of the tower structure when I observed a light source at bearing 234 degrees. The light was small, steady, and pale yellow in color. It appeared to be approximately 3 miles distant based on atmospheric clarity and apparent brightness. I watched it for 3 minutes. It was not moving. Then it moved. The motion was lateral, following what appeared to be a deliberate arc. It moved from bearing 234 to bearing 238 over the course of approximately 90 seconds, then reversed direction and returned to the original bearing. The movement repeated. I attempted radio contact with base station at 1912 hours. The transmission was clear on my end. The response was not a voice. It was a rhythmic static pattern, 3 pulses of white noise, a pause of approximately 2 seconds, then 3 pulses again. This pattern continued for 30 seconds. I repeated my transmission. The static pattern resumed, matching the interval exactly. I ended the transmission and continued observing the light. The weather remained clear. Wind was minimal. No precipitation. Temperature was approximately 32 degrees Fahrenheit, Over the next 4 hours, the light moved closer. The movement was not continuous. It would remain stationary for periods ranging from 8 to 15 minutes, then shift position. The bearing remained constant at 234 degrees. The elevation relative to the ridgeline did not change. In terrain with no visible roads or trails, this was inconsistent with any vehicle traffic pattern I could identify. At 2100 hours, the light was approximately 2 miles distant. At 2200 hours, it was approximately 1 mile distant. The rhythmic static pattern continued whenever I attempted radio contact. I did not attempt contact again after 2215 hours. At 2300 hours, I made the decision to evacuate the tower and proceed to my vehicle to return to base station. I secured the cabin, descended the stairs, and walked to the parking area approximately 200 yards from the tower base. My vehicle was a standard service truck, maintained to current specifications. I had performed a pre-trip inspection that morning. The engine had started without issue. I inserted the key into the ignition and turned it. Nothing occurred. The electrical systems did not engage. The battery indicator showed full charge. I attempted the ignition again. No response. I waited 10 minutes and attempted again. The result was identical. I returned to the tower. The light was still visible, now approximately half a mile distant. I re-entered the cabin and secured the door. I did not attempt further radio contact. I monitored the light's position throughout the night. It remained stationary at approximately half a mile distance, bearing 234 degrees, visible through the cabin windows. At 0600 hours, first light began to appear. The light source was no longer visible. I waited until full daylight, then descended the tower and walked to my vehicle. I inserted the key into the ignition. The engine started immediately. All systems functioned normally. I completed the winter shutdown procedure, filed my equipment report through standard channels, and noted the discrepancy regarding the firefinder bearing in the previous observer's logbook. I did not mention the light source or the radio interference or the vehicle malfunction. I was not instructed to omit these details. I simply did not include them. I returned to base station at 1100 hours. I was informed the following day that I had been reassigned to desk duties, pending a psychological evaluation. The evaluation was conducted by a contracted medical professional at the regional office. The session lasted approximately 40 minutes. I was not asked about the events at Copper Ridge. The evaluation was classified as routine and closed without further interview. The file has been archived. My reassignment remains in effect. Story number 2, intake 44. I arrived at Clatsop County Psychiatric Facility at 11:30 on a Tuesday night in March. The transfer paperwork had come through emergency services at the coast. A woman, mid-40s, found standing in the surf fully clothed. No identification on her person. No statement given. The paramedics noted she was conscious and breathing normally but unresponsive to verbal stimuli. I was working intake that night. It was routine work. I had been doing it for 8 years. She was sitting in the intake room when I entered, hands folded in her lap. Her clothing was still damp. The fabric of her jeans had darkened where water had soaked through, and her cardigan clung to her shoulders. Her hair was wet. I could smell salt water, yes, but there was something else underneath it. Something mineral and old. I noted it and moved forward with the assessment. I asked her name. She did not respond. I asked if she understood where she was. No response. I asked if she was experiencing thoughts of harming herself or others. She maintained eye contact the entire time. Her eyes were a pale blue, almost colorless in the fluorescent light. She did not blink often. I continued through the standard questions. Blood pressure, 118/76. Heart rate, 62. Respiration normal. No visible injuries. No apparent distress. She simply sat and looked at me. At 12:15, I stepped out of the intake room to document my initial observations. The hallway was empty. The facility was quiet except for the ambient hum of the climate control system. I was writing in my notes when I heard her voice. It came from behind the intake room door. Clear, steady, a woman's voice, speaking words I could not quite make out. I looked through the observation window. She was still seated in the same position, hands folded, mouth closed. I opened the door. The room was silent. She had not moved. I asked if she had spoken. She did not respond. I returned to the hallway and continued documenting. Within 5 minutes, I heard the voice again. This time I was certain it was coming from the intake room. But when I checked, she remained in the same position, mouth closed. The voice continued intermittently over the next 40 minutes, always when I was not in direct line of sight through the window. Always speaking in a tone that made my teeth ache in a way I could not explain. The words were almost distinguishable. Almost, but not quite. I contacted the on-call psychiatrist at 12:50. Dr. Reeves was supposed to be on call that night. The line produced only static. I tried again. Static. I tried the secondary line. The same. Both phones showed active connections. Both showed the calls were connecting. Both produced only static. At 1:05, I was reviewing the intake paperwork when I glanced through the observation window and noticed something that caused me to stop writing. The patient was still seated in the intake room. I could see her clearly through the glass. But in the reflection of the window, she was standing, and when I looked more carefully, the standing figure was moving independently of the seated one. The seated figure remained motionless. The standing figure was turning slowly, as though looking at something in the room. I did not move for approximately 30 seconds. Then I approached the window. Both figures stopped moving. When I looked directly at the room, only the seated patient was visible. When I looked at the reflection, only the seated patient was visible. I made a decision at that point that deviated from standard protocol. I did not wait for supervisory approval. I initiated an emergency medical quarantine and secured the intake wing using the facility's isolation protocol. This protocol is rarely used. It requires locking all external doors and activating the secondary ventilation system. It is designed for communicable disease containment. I had never used it before. I sat in the secured hallway for approximately 1 hour and 20 minutes. I did not enter the intake room again. I did not look through the observation window. I documented what I had observed in clinical language and waited. Dr. Reeves arrived at 2:30. He had been trying to reach the facility for some time. He said the phone lines had been experiencing intermittent failure. He seemed confused about why the isolation protocol had been activated. I explained what I had observed. He listened without interrupting. He examined the patient. She was unconscious but medically stable. Her clothing was completely dry. When he asked her questions while she was waking, she responded normally. She had no memory of the evening. She did not remember being found in the surf. She did not remember the intake room. She did not remember me. Dr. Reeves asked if I had administered any sedatives. I had not. He asked if she had been showing signs of extreme fatigue. I told him she had been alert and responsive throughout the assessment, with the exception of not speaking. He made a note in her file and said he would transfer her to the state hospital in the morning for psychiatric evaluation and observation. The incident was logged as a processing delay due to communication equipment failure. The patient was transferred the following morning. I was reassigned to daytime administrative duties within the week. Dr. Reeves did not mention the isolation protocol activation again, and I did not raise it. The file was archived according to standard procedure. The case was closed. Story number 3, Convoy Route 9. I pulled into the Interstate 80 rest stop near Ogallala at 11:30 at night for a scheduled fuel and rest break during a routine long-haul transport run. I had been driving since 4 in the morning out of Denver, and the stop was marked on my manifest as mandatory. The facility was well lit but quiet. The pumps were automated. The building itself, restrooms, vending area, information desk, showed no activity behind its glass doors. The lot held maybe 20 spaces. I counted one other vehicle when I arrived, a white sedan parked at an odd angle near the restrooms with its engine running and headlights on. The angle struck me as careless, not perpendicular to the space, not parallel either. Roughly 45 degrees, as if the driver had pulled in without regard for the lines. I fueled my truck, went through my walk, around inspection, checked tire pressure and fluid levels. Everything was in order. The sedan had not moved. Its headlights were still on. Its engine was still running. I timed it. 15 minutes passed. That was enough. My training covered this. Potentially distressed motorist. Report or approach. I chose to approach. The sedan's windows were tinted but not completely opaque. I could see the interior was dark. I could not see a driver. I knocked on the window. No response. I tried the door handle. It was unlocked. The interior smelled like nothing in particular. The driver's seat was empty. The passenger seat was empty. The back seats were empty. The engine was running. The radio was on cycling between stations. Not scanning, just cycling. Static, then a fragment of what might have been speech in a language I did not recognize, then static again. The pattern repeated every 4 seconds. I stepped back and looked at the lot. The sedan was the only other vehicle. I walked back to my truck to radio dispatch. My CB was dead. I checked the frequency, nothing. I tried my cell phone. No signal. I tried the truck's ignition. The battery was good. The dash lights came on, but the starter would not engage. I had passed inspection 3 hours earlier at a truck stop outside North Platte. Everything had been functional. I sat in the cab for approximately 2 minutes. Then I looked back at the sedan. Its headlights had begun to dim and brighten in a regular pattern. On for 3 seconds. Off for 3 seconds. On again. I watched this for 1 cycle. Then I looked across the lot. There were now 4 white sedans parked in different spaces. Each one had its engine running. Each one had its headlights on. The headlights were all dimming and brightening in synchronization. I did not leave the cab. I locked the doors. I turned off my interior lights and sat in darkness. My training covered emergency protocols. I maintained visual documentation. I noted the time on my watch, 11:58. I noted the positions of the 4 vehicles. I noted that their headlights continued to pulse in unison. I noted that the radio in the nearest sedan, the original one, continued its cycling pattern, static in fragments and static again. At 12:23, a 5th sedan appeared in the lot. It parked at the far end, near the tree line that bordered the facility. Its headlights were on. Its engine was running. Its headlights pulsed with the others. I did not sleep. I remained in the sleeper cab with the doors locked and the interior dark. The vehicles remained. I watched them. At one point, around 2 in the morning, I noticed that one of the sedans had moved to a different space. Not driven, moved. It was simply in a new location. The headlights continued their pattern. The engines continued to run. At 3:45 in the morning, I blinked. When I opened my eyes, the lot was empty. All 5 sedans were gone. The rest stop was silent. The pumps were dark. The building was dark. Only the overhead lot lights remained on, casting everything in a flat, sodium-colored uniformity. I waited until 5 in the morning. My truck's ignition turned over on the first try. My CB crackled to life with normal chatter. My cell phone showed 3 bars in the correct time. I did not refuel. I drove directly to the company yard in Cheyenne, arriving at 7:30 in the morning. I filed an incident report before my shift ended. I described the sedan, the empty driver's seat, the radio cycling between stations, the loss of all vehicle systems, and the presence of multiple identical vehicles in the lot. I noted times and positions. I included everything I had documented. The report was escalated within 2 hours to a regional safety coordinator named Vance Mercer, whom I had never met and did not know existed in the company structure. Mercer called me at home that evening. He asked me to describe the incident again. I did. He asked me to describe the language on the radio. I told him I could not identify it. He asked me if I had been fatigued. I told him I had been alert. He told me to take 6 days of paid administrative leave, effective immediately. During those 6 days, I was not contacted. My route assignment was changed. When I returned to work, I was reassigned to daytime runs only, primarily east-west corridors that avoided Nebraska entirely. My previous overnight routes were given to other drivers. I asked no questions. I accepted the reassignment. The document stated that the incident of 11:30 on the date in question had been reviewed and classified as a fatigue-related perceptual event, that my fitness for duty had been assessed and confirmed, and that I was bound by confidentiality regarding the details and circumstances of the incident. Before I returned to active duty, I was required to sign a document. The classification was final. The matter was closed. I signed. The document was filed. My incident report was removed from my personnel file and transferred to a restricted archive maintained by the regional office. The matter is now closed.